Okay,
All right.
great. So welcome everyone to our Intro to Dungeons and Dragons program. Our presenter is Dave Hansen. He is also going to be our dungeon master for the series of games that we will be starting up in late January. So this is kind of like a part one of an Intro to Dungeons and Dragons. Part two is next week, so we highly encourage you to join us next week to create your character that will then be used for our campaign next year. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Dave.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave. I think my next slide might have a little bit more of an introduction. Just a little bit about myself. I been involved. A lot of my gaming has been with Extra Life and volunteering, doing board games and video games for charity. And then my experience personally with Dungeons and Dragons, when I was about 8 years old, my dad in the 70s and 80s played Dungeons and Dragons, so he taught me and my cousins when we were younger. And when I was younger, I didn't really understand the game, but my dad was super flexible with me. If anyone who remembers the 90s X-Men show, I wanted to be a character like Morph from the X-Men with shapeshifting. And I think he helped me create, I think I was a druid who could shapeshift into animals. He's like, that's the closest we can do. I'm like, perfect. Played a little bit when I was younger, and then in college, I got back into the game when a friend of mine in college invited me to fill in as their rogue had to miss a session, and I just jumping back into the game realized how much I missed a improv experience where it's just like what you can do is really based on your imagination. So I played a few campaigns with my cousins and some friends, a couple of one-shot adventures afterwards. And then a few years ago, I posted how I wanted to run a game, and a friend reached out, and I wound up running a game for basically like my childhood friends from grade school, high school, and college. And I've been hooked on actually just trying to run games and trying to introduce new people to the game. And then over the last year, I was running a campaign for my cousins virtually, as we had some in other states, others in different parts of Illinois. And it was a great way to stay connected with everything. And Dungeons and Dragons, what is D&D? It's kind of like a thing that's been in the zeitgeist, especially I feel like it's gotten bigger in the last few years. It's a fantasy role-playing game created by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson in 1974 as an alternative to miniature wargaming. They, if I remember correctly, they used to play like war reenactments of famous battles. However, they wanted to take the ideas of Tolkien's fantasy world and apply it with a similar rule set and created their own rules. It's improvised storytelling in a fantasy world that can incorporate different elements like steampunk or sci-fi. There's even ways you can incorporate Dungeons and Dragons with worlds like I've seen Neverland and the Peter Pan universe. I've recently kickstarted one where it takes place in the Hellboy comic universe. And I wanted to throw this quote: I am a dungeon master. I create a boundless world and then I bind it by rules. And that was one of my favorite lines from the D&D episodes of Community, where Abed was the dungeon master. I just want to take a moment to see if anyone had experience. If you don't mind replying, you can either, if you want to unmute, if that's possible, or if you want to just post in chat, just to kind of see if you have experience. I'd like to know if you haven't played before. Also would like to know, just to kind of see where people are at and maybe their familiarity with it.
No experience on my end.
Okay. No experience. Okay. My character is a tiefling cleric who worships the moon goddess. Very cool. No experience. That's okay. Leads me to my. We've tried to pally together as a family, play together. I read that exactly. Play together as a family a few times. That's very cool. Which leads me to my next question. If you haven't played D&D, I'd just like to get an idea if there's maybe reasons you haven't before, or maybe something that's gotten you interested to finally try it now. Just kind of curious what brings you in today.
I guess I'll start off. I'm a heavy board gamer.
Okay.
And did a lot of the dungeon type of games. So that's what kind of got me peeked into now looking into Dungeons and Dragons.
Cool. No idea how to start. No DM experience. Okay. Understandable. So I like this because I think I might have some things that kind of goes into those kind of things coming up. And I'm just always curious. I always like to, always had interest in it, but have always loved RPGs. That's very cool. So I kind of want to break it down into things that maybe require, like that you may need to play it, ways to get into it, and then also things to hopefully help you play it as well. The core books or starter set is kind of the main things to really start off. There's the player's handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual. I always like to shout this out, but you can actually get some of these books through the library system. There's also a starter set that is phenomenal. It includes general rules, information, and adventure to jump into, as well as some dice. I use that for my campaign. I started when I started DMing for friends. It's almost very step-by-step, is a good way to start into the game. And because I have so many books, I really couldn't decide. So we have the Monster Manual, if you see in your stores, the Dungeon Master's Guide. I have so many books. And the Player's Handbook. So the one thing I will say for playing as a character, the Player's Handbook is about all you need. For running Dungeons and Dragons, all three may be a little bit more required. However, you can piecemeal or buy bundles. There's options to it. You will also need a Dungeon Master or a Game Master. That term gets used interchangeably. A lot of times on some sites, you even might see it shortened to like DM or GM to run the adventure. You will need players to run through the adventure. And because not only do I have a lot of books, but you're going to need some polyhedral dice. I've got some, you can get them resin or shiny metal ones. And a lot of the game is based on some of the rules, but the dice kind of determine how things turn out. And then I always recommend ways to take notes. I have a set of crystal dice because I'm extra like that. Hold on. So I do Extra Life, and I got this fancy little case. And you don't have to get this fancy when you're getting into the game, but it even has lights for the dice. I haven't used them yet. I'm looking forward to it. And ways to take notes. Like notebooks and pencils. I like to go a little bit above and beyond. Usually for a new group, when I do play in person, I will actually go to a dollar store and I'll buy all my players, usually a mechanical pencil, maybe a pen too, but like $1 notebook. And I'll kind of get into that in a little bit, but notes for the DM and the players are going to probably be helpful, especially the longer you play a game. So, as it was kind of brought up, starting as a new dungeon master. As I mentioned, the starter set includes rules, an adventure to run for players, and reference information. So it has like the monster stats, things like that. And you can almost play it. The hard part is like with improvising, it's like things can go a little off rails, but it has a pretty much like straight through. You can play through levels 1 through 5 with your player characters. There are also adventures available through resources sites like DM's Guild or Drive-Thru RPG. And then, as I have more books, supplemental books like Curse of Strahd, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and others contain adventures or campaign settings for a dungeon master. If anyone's ever heard of the show Critical Role, there's also the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount. It has information on like some adventures that you can run, the world you can set it in, and character options that are beyond just the standard from the player's handbook. And it's a great way for kind of just going into the next step. You can, when you're starting a campaign, you can create your own adventures, campaign, or even your world if you'd like. Or if you want something that you can either base off of or just kind of just run straight through, those module books, online materials, I feel like is a great way for helping you dip your toes into running the game. Because a lot of times, like, they'll come with the maps. It'll come with, like, when you enter a room, it'll come with descriptions, so you can almost just read it straight from the book. And I always recommend for Dungeon Masters, talk to your players to get an idea of what they may want to cover or what they want from the game. So when I say that, I kind of mean it as get to know like what they're looking for. Are they looking for like a gothic setting or pirated adventure? Are they looking for it to be a little bit more funny or serious? But also, do they like to role play their characters, or are they more interested in combat? Just to try to find that balance when looking into the adventures and settings and things you're going to do for them. Now, starting as a new player, the biggest step is creating a character, and that can take into the fact of find a role that sounds interesting to you. Whether you want to be the tough brute warrior, or maybe like a timid healer who likes to avoid combat, or the charming rogue who may sometimes like try to sneak food out of your partner's pack or something like that. Think about the kind of character you want to play. I'd also recommend when starting up as a group, talk with your group about what kind of characters you're interested in playing or what they may want to play, or the type of character you want to create. A necromancer. I somewhere in my storage unit, I have Diablo 2 supplemental information, and I believe there's information on playing a necromancer in the Diablo setting. And sometimes you can find that information. The nice thing about these books is as they create new classes and things like that, they do add information on how to create a character like that. When we've tried to play, passage of time, distance, and tracking inventory have been things that were difficult for us to track. That's okay. That is also passage of time and distance is another thing I have a hard time. What I've done is sometimes just I don't know if the Wayne's World analogy is the best way to describe it, like the doodle doodle doodle, but just kind of like describe how long it may take. Sometimes it's just like jump to the end. If you don't expect like combat or any encounters, you can play it differently. And it's all about just kind of improvising. That just takes getting used to playing the game and getting used to that kind of stuff. Be prepared to play, like having any of your notes ready, character information in your sheet, and just being courteous. Biggest thing I could say is, like, if you're planning on meeting, if you can arrive a little early, especially for the interest of time. If you can play Dungeons and Dragons for a long period of time or short, but if people arrive later, that just means it's less time that you have to play. And then also taking notes during the game. There may be important clues to puzzles, things you need to remember for later, like details on the quest you're on. And it is also a big help for the game master in case they miss something too, maybe forget, or need a reference for later. And some of the tools we'll get into, my group is really bad at taking notes. We should be better about it. It's really hard, especially if you're in the moment. And sometimes that's just like for the DM to maybe just either improvise later or just try to take notes if you can. Sometimes being the game master, DM master, is a little bit of extra work, but just as players, just some things I recommend. And getting into a game. There are different ways you can get into a game. You can reach out to friends and family and be like, hey, I want to play. Is anyone interested? It may take a little bit more work, as if people have to learn how to play, learn some of the rules. Me personally, I feel like the rules are just there. I'm trying to remember the quote from Pirates of the Caribbean. It's more like a guideline than a rule. There are also ways you can join, like your local game store, gaming cafes, or libraries may have dedicated groups or nights for RPGs. There's online groups like Facebook groups or meetup.com where you can look into finding a group to join or those kind of events. And then local game groups I put on there because I've over the years I was gaming with a board game group that I met through Oaklawn Library, and we played a lot of board games. But a way you can find a group of like-minded people to maybe play together, or even like joining the groups and playing with strangers. And then there are optional materials for the game. There are supplemental books for additional adventures, as I mentioned. Items and options like for character creation, like the books I mentioned, the Curse of Strahd, Ghosts of Saltmarsh. And that one I recommended because that book has a little bit more details. If you want to do like a seafaring adventure, there's actually information on how to operate a boat of different kinds. And Tales from the Yawning Portal, which just has kind of more like one-shots. They can either just run for your friends. The Pirate Code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules. Thank you, Vernon. A DM screen to keep quick reference and to hide things from players. There is DM screens they can buy that are official. I have one that a friend got me. I've got so much sunlight coming in. But the thing about it is, for quick reference and things to hide, usually like a DM's notes, books, and dice rolls would usually, like, this might be the view your players might see. But just kind of give you an idea. You can see it. There is actual reference and material and just kind of quick guides. So you don't have to always look it up in a book. That is probably the biggest thing to have. But I've also seen people, when I was looking into options, I had an old 4th edition DM screen. I actually went online and found like updated 5th edition rules. And I just like printed them out on paper and just kind of taped them on the old DM screen, so I didn't have to spend that much money. I've also seen people create their own out of um, uh, binders, like they just have binders in front of them. And then, of course, you can have miniature figures and maps to give more visualization to the game. However, you don't necessarily need to. A lot of the games I played have not had miniatures or maps, but what some might describe as theater of the mind, which is more you're using your imagination and just kind of improvising, and just kind of taking notes, like when monsters are taking damage and things like that. You might have like a small map as like a guideline to help you follow along where you're at. But the reason I bring that up is like I've even played Dungeons and Dragons with my friends on a coffee table. So no map, no nothing. Just 5 people at a coffee table. I had my DM screen and my notes in front of me, and everyone else had their notebooks and dice. So very low space required for something like that. If you want to go a little bit more, you can create physical props to give or show your players. I've seen some dungeon masters who write letters or print letters, or a friend of mine created their own kind of like it was a puzzle where it had like different images on each side. Basically, they took like a paper towel roll, cut it out, and then kind of glued it onto something so you could actually twist it. And then like you had your images that you had to line up in a specific way, and that's how they solved the puzzle. So ways you can make it a little bit more interactive, but also give it that little bit of realism to help them with the imagining what's going on. Another thing, not necessary, but is nice to have if you invest in more things, dice boxes or towers for keeping dice rolls from falling off the table. It's real nice. It also helps, like this metal thing can probably do a little bit of, if you have a wood table you don't want to scratch up. I'd recommend maybe like a dice box, or they have game mats just to kind of help keep the scratches off. And then all the dice. I'll see if I can show it out. I have a few sets of dice here, polyhedral ones, but you can also keep them. A friend of mine made me this Jaws dice bag, and there's a lot more dice in here, and I have a few more dice bags too. I have a dice problem, and it seems to be a common thing once you get really into the game. And then in the presentation I did it before, this is a way of playing online, as things have been changing constantly with restrictions and things like that. But and also to just kind of help if you have friends or you can't find a group locally to play in person, there are ways you can play online to give you that broader reach of who you maybe to join and play games. There are chat programs like Discord or Zoom or Google Meet. I probably would recommend Discord because even with the free version, there's no time restriction. D&D Beyond is an online service for digital books, materials, dice, and more to help run games online. I'm going to kind of give an overview on that in a little bit, because I think there's some other things that are real helpful in that. There are also online services like Roll20, Tabletop Simulator, and Fantasy Grounds, where it'll help in a way of running games online where you can have a map and tokens and things like that for running a game so people can see what they're actually doing if you don't want to do theater of the mind. And then there's Neverwinter Online for MMORPG in the Dungeons and Dragons world. And there's also like a bunch of different games. I'm trying to remember. There's one specifically. I'll check my Steam library. If I remember, I think it's Divinity Original Sin. There's 2 of the games, but it's an online. it can be a co-op up to 4 players, if I remember, RPG. That's very much like a Dungeons and Dragons. So if you even want to play like a video game that is like Dungeons and Dragons, that might be an option as well. And I think that is at least some of the presentation. Now I'm going to kind of go a little bit more into some of the online tools and just things I talked about just to kind of show you. Does anyone have any questions? I'm sorry if I was kind of reading through everything real quick, but just if you have questions about what I've gone over or things you want to know a little bit more about. Okay. There's still time to throw it in the chat. I'm gonna kind of bring up something that I mentioned a little bit as I'm going a little bit more in depth. So this is one of those websites I was mentioning, the Drive-Thru RPG. It's a online marketplace where you can buy digital RPG games, supplemental information, like supplemental adventures and things like that you can add to it. As I mentioned, this is that Hellboy, the role-playing game, quick start. It actually uses the Dungeons and Dragons like rule set, but gives it a little bit of overlay of the Hellboy universe. And there's like other things you can buy there. There's other RPGs if you're looking to even branch off. There's Call of Cthulhu. There's RPGs set in the Doctor Who universe. I don't know if it's still available, but there was a Firefly RPG. I once played a Ghostbusters RPG. There all sorts of things that are available, as well as like maps and monsters. It's a pretty great resource if you're looking for either you don't want to buy. I still like having physical books, but I'm slowly getting into digital for my reference material just because sometimes I just like being able to have like a quick search through to find what I need rather than flipping through a bunch of books. But I still like to read through the books to get a better understanding of how to run an adventure. And I'll put this in the link or in the. I'll kind of come back to the like postseason here. This is Roll20, as I mentioned previously. This is the site I was mentioning where you can have they have a lot of tools in here where you can do more of a visual presentation of running Dungeons and Dragons. As far as tokens, there's lighting effects and things like that. It looks different for players versus the Dungeon Master. So this is kind of, I'll see if I can pull this up as a reference. This is a game I was running with my cousins previously, but just kind of give you an idea. This is a adventure I bought out of the Tales of the Yawning Portal. Let's see if I can see. Here we go. So to kind of give you an idea, this is like a really cool tool if you're going to play. There's like a chat feature. You can have like character sheets implemented. And then like over here, they have like light sources. So you can actually see like, this is my view, but a player view might be different. They have like a light source. So like this radius is the light source they have. So like, depending on the room, if it's a larger room, it may not become visible. So it's a pretty neat feature. These are like some monsters they faced before, and then there's like information on the monsters and running it, and you can either buy piecemeal or full adventure books all in one. Let's see if I can bring up. Can you show us a character sheet if you have one in this game? I can, and I'm also going to show a character sheet in D&D and D&D Beyond. Let me see if I can. Trying to remember. Some of my cousins use their own like physical character sheets. One of them was playing basically a sentient mechanical guard. Arhethian, I think, was our warlock. Yeah, that's the kind of cool thing is like with D&D, like there are races and classes and so many things that you can kind of piecemeal or create. Basically, he was like a sentient guard who had finished his duties and I was trying to find something new to do. It was almost like not as much of a personality, but imagine Bender from Futurama is the best way he also treated anyone biological. So this is the character sheet for my cousin's Arhethian. Was a Dragonborn warlock because he was looking for necromancer. Got brought up earlier. A warlock might be the closest to a necromancer in base D&D because a lot of their spells and things deal with a deity. But and I'm going to show. So this is like what the character sheet on Roll20 looks like. So they can actually keep track of their own stuff within the app itself. And as I mentioned, I actually bought this module, so I had all the assets here, the tokens. And you can also create your own maps and things like that. So there's a free version, but you can also pay for, they have a subscription model for more features, and then you can also buy, as I mentioned, the adventures and things like that. I'm going to show you D&D Beyond, though, because this is my preferred place to do character creation. I'm going to actually show you like how awesome this is as a tool set. One, there's an app for D&D Beyond. So if you buy your books now and your character sheets, you can access it all on like a mobile device, which I've heard some friends actually did a camping trip with their like iPads or tablets, loaded up their characters on D&D Beyond, and just played around a bonfire all night. And I'm going to show you why that's possible. So this is a character I created for a charity thing where I give it to a friend. This is Hope. She is a tiefling rogue. This is a character at level 1. Not much for the character. But the thing I really like about D&D Beyond is how I mentioned tools for helping you play this game. The website and the app is also just as good. So you have your character name, description here, the level you're running at. You have your different stats here that you can click on, your skills. There was mention about keeping track of inventory and things like that. You can literally add items to your inventory here. If you are in a campaign in D&D Beyond, your DM, I believe, can add items to a character's inventory from their own management system. So that's a nice little feature. If they want to give you like a secret item, you can have your spells, actions. So the thing I like about D&D Beyond is like, so these are saving throws. Saving throws generally involve when something negative is happening to you. The dungeon master or game master might ask you to do a saving throw. So say like you're about to fall in a pit of like spikes. The dungeon master might ask you to do like a dexterity throw to see if you dive away from the falling floor. I'm going to clear this real quick. So when I clicked on the dexterity saving throw, gives you a description of what this is. And then if I click on the +4, it will roll a digital D20 and add your stat and give you your total. So if your dungeon master asks you to do it, it'll do the math for you. It's pretty simple. Roll20 has similar features, but I feel like it's a little bit more tricky. It's good, but there are times where it can be a little confusing. This I feel is like so much more streamlined. With Roll20, it's very much like, as I mentioned, it would put it, if you can see here, Unit 42 is doing a strength check here, and that's what it looks like. Luckily, it has that information, and it does give you like, I give them a random note or item I made up. But yeah, this is what it looks like over here. So if you're not playing if you're playing in person or you're playing online, D&D Beyond is a pretty great tool. And then I have my characters. There are digital dice, some information for campaigns. The nice thing is like if I have a subscription to D&D Beyond, I really recommend it. If you buy digital content on D&D Beyond and you have the subscription, I can create a campaign where anyone in the campaign can share the purchased materials that they might have in their collection. So it's kind of nice where it's like maybe one person only has to buy a book or information, and it's shared between everyone. Let's see if I can. Sorry, I use the maps or the. So there's. Sorry, y'all. Oh, here we go. So like I have the player's handbook in a visual. The app has it more in a book standard format. There's a nice search feature. So if I just need to know like what a poison effect is or what a spell is, I can actually just search it. Like I said, I love reading through the books when starting out, but like as I'm playing, I like quick reference material. So yeah, I just kind of want to share that with you. If you're looking for options of being able to have quick access or not buying a physical book and having a giant collection, they look great on a shelf, but they are heavy. And this is, I should have showed this one earlier. DM's Guild is another great supplemental information, and I believe they have Adventure League information, but more things you can add to your Dungeons and Dragons experience and adventures. And then this is meetup.com. I was a part of a group that was RPG Chicago, which is no longer as active, but there are other board games in the Chicago area, and they'll sometimes, like I mentioned, have like game nights at local arcade, and not arcades, but like if anyone ever went to Geek Bar when they were open. But there are some other board game stores and cafes that have RPG nights. So if you're looking to join groups, even maybe searching like Facebook groups for RPG groups in the area, things like that. Anyone have questions about some of the things I showed you? Kind of keep it up here, and I'm also going to go back to that character sheet just because I like the look of it. And the other thing is, it's nice that once you have items in your inventory for your weapons and things like that, I can roll the dice to see what the attack would be, and then another one for what the damage would be. So it's pretty simple. If you're not sure, just kind of streamlines a lot of things. And next week when I do the character creation sheet event, I will probably go. I'll go a little more in depth into what each of these are. But I'll also show you. Is there a map in D&D? Let's see. Not as robust. I keep feeling like they're going to add it at some time, at some point. So I'm trying to remember, because I feel like Roll20 has such a big thing on like the digital ground. There's an extra life. Oh boy, I wish I remember the name of it. There's an extra life material that came out. If I can find it. It's if my iPad died before this thing, but I was gonna share it. You can also pre-order events. Let's see. A lot of times there will be maps if it was included with the actual book. I'm trying to find. I have this cute one where it was like for extra life, and it was like you play almost like otter people. They look like otters. I bet I'm gonna find it like when I least expect it. Oh, I hope they didn't take it down. But yeah, it had like playing an underwater adventure, which was pretty cool, and like how to play a game when you're a seafaring creature. But they also have, if you're looking to do, it was, here we go. My Encounters. This is a nice tool if you're playing as a dungeon. If you're a dungeon master, you can create. I created this encounter for my cousin's game where I had, what was it? It was, oh yeah, these were the characters. And then I had the initiative for these, but it was like, I could click on each character and see their stats. And it's such a great tool for just streamlining if you're nervous about DMing and not sure where to get the information, things like that. I feel like D&D Beyond has become my best tool that I could recommend for just kind of making things as simpler as possible. Yeah, I had him fight this bandit captain, and he was rough. He took down most of the players, and I had to be gentle. So as a dungeon master, I always say I like to, when teaching new people, I would like to make it more fun than exact. So if I was rolling a little hard and I could maybe knock out a character in their first turn, I might make my damage a little bit less. So they're near getting knocked out, but not fully out. Because I'd rather them have fun than feel like it's punishing. And that's kind of what the improvising part is, like using your best judgment on things. But yeah, that's kind of like a little overall on things I can mention. I highly recommend, if you're thinking about becoming a dungeon, a GM or a DM, maybe looking into one of those starter sets. There's the Rick and Morty one that came out, I believe. There's the Stranger Things one that came out. There's the standard one. Yeah, let's maybe do that. Yeah, we can end the recording here and just kind of do a Q&A and answer any questions or anything else I can help you with.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And to anybody watching this later, I hope you join us.
Yeah.
Let me figure out how to stop the recording.
Yeah, there's so much